Yes, so I'm going to say a few words about the organization that I founded now 4 years ago, the Existential Risk Observatory, what we're doing, what we think existential risks are, why we think they're a serious problem, and also a solution proposal, the Conditional AI Safety Treaty. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the latter because I think we have only 10 minutes and I think that's maybe the most interesting. So just quickly, what are existential risks? We follow the definition of Toby Ord, which says that risks threaten the destruction of humanity's long-term potential are existential risks. So this includes human extinction, obviously, but also unrecoverable collapse or a dystopian lock-in. And he's also trying to quantify these risk estimates, and I think you can take this with a big pinch of salt, but I do think that the conclusion that unaligned AI is a significant existential risk is broadly correct, personally. So why is this so? I think one very important graph, something important about the time that we're living in, is here on the right. I have an engineering background, so I kind of like to present things in graphs. So on the x-axis you see the time, and on the y-axis you see the amount of floating point operations per second, or how powerful computers are, basically. How powerful a computer you can buy for $1 million. And for a long time this was way below anything that we could do in our brains. So actually the computer, between brackets, that you can see our brains as, is way more powerful than the computer that we used to be able to build. Up until now, almost, and yeah, it's plus or minus a few years, but we are, I think, at a point where computers that you can buy for a reasonable amount of money are as powerful as we are. So I think that's a really big, yeah, and kind of fundamental change that's happening right now. So it doesn't mean necessarily that AI can already think at a human level. It doesn't also necessarily not mean that this is already an existential risk. But this has been the explicit goal of the field, to build AI of human level since the 50s. They never quite had the computing power, but now they do. So although data and algorithms are probably still needed, I think we should take the option realistically or seriously that they might actually achieve this, and try to manage the risks that this entails. So I'm not really going to make the case for why AI is an existential risk right now. That would take a bit too long in 10 minutes, but I think you've heard already quite a bit about this during the rest of the day. Otherwise, there's also more information on our website, and if you have personal questions, you're invited to contact me by email. But how to reduce AI existential risk? We think there are two basic options. One is AI alignment, so somehow making sure that this AI is acting in the interest of humanity, whatever that means exactly. And the second one is some kind of regulation. So make sure that something along the lines of the precautionary principle, make sure that we do not build anything that we potentially cannot control. And we think that, especially, and there's also many kinds of combinations between the two, but we think that in order to achieve at least regulation, widespread awareness of the problem will first be required. So what we try to do as an organization is raise AI existential risk awareness, aiming for effective regulation. So we raise awareness at scale using traditional media as an organization. So we've published about 35 articles in the Dutch and international media, notably Foreign Time magazine, trying to share the risk that we see with the public, and hoping that this will achieve in the long run regulation that's actually reducing these risks. We also organize events, and there's one event tomorrow actually, on the eve of the summit, day after tomorrow. So we still have a few places left, so if you Google or you can go to our website, I guess, existentialriskobservatory.org, and check the events that we have there, and there's a link to our event tomorrow with Joshua Bengio and many other great speakers, so we're probably invited there. We're also researching communication effectiveness. I won't really go into that now for the sake of time, and we're also advising policymakers. I'll go a bit more into especially one particular policy advice that we're giving, because I think that's an interesting innovation, and we call it the Conditional AI Safety Treaty. So basically the core concept is if AI capabilities get too close to loss of control level, And alignment is not conclusively solved, so we can't really tell for sure that this AI is going to do exactly what we want. Then signatory countries hold dangerous training runs. So, and this treaty should get signed by the US, China, and potentially other countries, and we've proposed this in Time magazine, as you see on the right, a few months ago. So there's kind of a combination, I think, of a few developments in the field. One are if-then commitments, and you see on the right a publication by Yoshia Bengio, is going to be the keynote tomorrow. Also the most cited AI scientist, and Geoffrey Hinton, second most cited AI scientist, who proposed that something called an if-then commitment. So if a certain level of capabilities is achieved, or if a certain amount of misalignment cannot be ruled out, then something happens. So it combines this idea with the idea of responsible scaling, and that's actually by the AI labs, so by Anthropic and OpenAI. They're proposing to still scale, so still train ever bigger and ever more capable AI, but do this in a responsible way. So basically this means running evals and make sure that the capabilities of those AIs are not going beyond a certain unsafe level. So we're kind of doing the same, but then on the global level and anchored in policy. And the third one that is combining is a PAWS treaty, which is proposed by PAWS AI and by a number of other organizations. So this is basically saying, okay, we're going to sign a treaty with participating countries, detailing that we should pause development. So we're combining these, and we're saying, okay, once we are at a level too close to loss of control, then we are then signatory countries are committing to pause. So that brings you one problem, namely who will decide how close is too close. So what we're proposing is to delegate this to the AI safety institutes. They're public, they're independent from the labs, and they have technical knowledge, evals. So we say that these evals should be developed towards measuring how close we are to loss of control. So conditional AI safety treaty solves two major issues, we think. One is coordination and the other is timing. So coordination, that's basically, a treaty is a very classical way to solve coordination issues between countries, relatively proven, although enforcement is also always an issue. But in principle, a treaty itself is a way to solve coordination between countries. But also timing. Timing is also a big issue because, as you see on the right, some people, some experts also think that artificial general intelligence is still decades away. So to pause right now, that would have the disadvantage that if those people are right, then you're regulating kind of for not really a good reason. So what we're saying is, although we also support organizations such as PAWS AI, I'm actually in the board of PAWS AI in the Netherlands. But we do think that this is something that you could push for at policymakers right now, and it's maybe a bit more, as perhaps a bit bigger chance of getting accepted. So the advantage of the conditional treaty is that it takes timing into account. So there's some interesting geopolitics of a conditional AI safety treaty. So who should sign it? What we propose is at least the US and China, since they're leading in AI. I actually made this slide before DeepSeek, but it turned out to be very accurate. So US and China are right now arguably leading in AI. So this would kill the argument from the US side that okay, if we slow down, then how about China, because they could overtake us. If you sign a treaty, then this argument doesn't make sense anymore. Plus, we also think that the US and China are in general powerful countries, and they might have the power to make other sign or pause as well. So we have a relatively hard time imagining a world where the US and China are pausing, but Portugal or something, any Portuguese around here, is still developing AI or human level AI. So this probably won't happen in practice. So we think, yeah, also for that reason, it's important that at least those two countries are on board. But eventually, we think that it should be a treaty for all countries. So it should be signed at a certain forum. So I think the Bletchley AI Safety Summit, or right now the AI Action Summit in Paris, are one important forum where this could be signed by the US-China bilateral meeting, or UN might be other options. So how should the treaty be enforced? This is an open question. And I think, in fact, there are two big issues here. One is how to make sure that you coordinate in between countries, and the treaty is an attempt to solve this problem. But there's another problem that's also important, which is how does one country actually make sure that no unsafe AI is developed within its borders, especially for a longer time. This gets probably more difficult. So we're doing some research into how to make sure that this is still reliably enforced, but right now it's a big open academical question, I think. Especially hardware progress and algorithmic progress, it might mean that this question gets more difficult. So there's some major open questions remaining, and we think this is a great research opportunity for those interested in this. Also, what constitutes aligned AI? So this treaty, at some point you could say, okay, the AI is now aligned, congratulations, you're allowed to go ahead. But what does it entail exactly? So when can the restrictions of the treaty be lifted? So technical alignment is one. It's something that you need to achieve, but it's insufficient by itself. So you also need to decide, okay, what is this AI actually going to do? Value alignment, okay, to whose values? Intent alignment, maybe to whose intents? Maybe under a UN commission could be one possible solution. And there's also more exotic academic options, such as the coherent extrapolated volition, which is very interesting. But this is basically just, these are all open academic questions, I think. So great research opportunities in my opinion. So I'll leave it at that, and I won't really go into the future work right now, so I'll take some questions.